Usually start with that. Let's start at that table over there.
Sure. You have something with Global Risk Consultants.
Nick Koenig with Global Risk.
Herb May, Liberty Mutual.
And Councilman Fire.
Bill Donner, Midwest Fire.
Bruce Smith, with Acuity Mutual.
Okay, here. Okay, you're standing now.
I am Mark Sorensen, Alltech Engineering Department.
Doug Rivers with 3M.
Mark Bangles with Nfpa.
Russell Levitt with Intelligent.
Let's go to the fire department.
Steve Zaggart, St. Paul Fire Marshal.
Phil Owens, St. Paul Systems, Fire Marshal.
Katie, I actually control that guy.
Tom Miller, mechanical contractor. Tom Prime, St. Paul Fire Inspector.
Oh, yeah, and him. No.
Dave Nelson, Nelson Engineering Sales.
You should put on a white shirt, it might fit right in.
Dan Chano, Summit Fire Consulting.
Pat McCarthy, Summit Fire.
Mitch Howell, Summit Fire.
Ryan Alvar, Summit Fire.
Angela Sweet, from the fire.
Now you realize you're going to get fined for all sitting together.
And they all sat by me.
Dean Kaminsky, Gilbert Fire.
You're all sitting together too. This is a good night.
Bob Cacala, Skyline Fire.
Tom Antel,
Ryan Beerworth, Summit Fire Consulting.
Dave Duffy with the Hayes Companies.
Tom Johnson, Olson Fire.
Sean Hoppy, Brothers Fire.
Steve Frederickson, ADT.
Paul Burke, G&K Services.
Let's go with Ken here. Ken? All right, Ken Strand with Marsh.
Gary Prescott, Control Fire.
Tony Martin with Michelle Erickson, Engineers.
Jeff Jacobson, Response Fire.
Dave Hewitt, Response Fire. Phil Walker, Control Fire.
Paul Watercut, Simplex Grinnell.
Ryan Interact Application. And I'm Ed Myers, Fire Design. Well, thank you very much for being here. We're going to do a couple of things tonight. At this point in time, we have about a total of about 36 paid members. There are about 16 of you here tonight, 16 or 17 of you here tonight. And one of the things that we need to get into, we have actually commissioned, put together a committee to review the bylaws. Our bylaws were from the 60s and the 70s and have never been updated. Doug, you've been on that committee, you are on the committee. I believe Scott Charles on the committee, is it not? Brian Beeworth is here, he's heading the committee, and what he would like to do tonight is introduce you to our new bylaws. Once we're done with the meeting, I will email a PDF file to all the members so that they can actually look and review and read the bylaws as we have put them together now. And then we're looking at a vote, preferably at the next month's meeting. The last meeting of the year, we're going to go out. Ken, are we still going out to the St. Paul companies to actually take a look at their facilities? Again, they got a new lab set up there. So that's not a good time to vote, and we'd like to do this before the year is out so we can start fresh with the new year with a new set of new constitution, right?
Yes.
Not bylaws, because bylaws are...
Constitutions, not bylaws, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Again, I'm Ryan Beerworth. As Ed mentioned, Scott Cottrell, Doug Rivers, and Warren Anderson are all on this committee. What we did was we noticed the need to do this because we had, as Ed mentioned, the original document from Minnesota was from 1964, which is older than me. There was also...
So are my socks.
So we took the content of that document and actually got a similar document from the Mid-South chapter, which I believe is Tennessee, is that right? So we used the format of that document and put the two together. The committee's worked very hard just to give you a feel for that. This is actually revision 10 that we've gone through. So we've gone back and forth, kind of noodling this thing together. As Ed mentioned, you're going to send out PDF versions of this.
To all the registered members.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of one of the key things, is that the people that will vote on this are the paid members. So if you want to have a say in this, you need to be a paid member. That's kind of one of the themes here. What else can I tell you? Basically, rather than read it to you, I'll just tell you that the table of contents, it goes through the name, and that was fairly debated, because before this group was called the Minnesota Fire Protection Council. Is that right, Phil?
At one point in time.
Yeah, so we recognize the fact that historically we've been called that, but officially our name is the Minnesota Chapter of Society of Fire Protection Engineers. Talks about the objectives of the chapter, defines who are members and who are not, so that, again, that's very well defined. There's been debate about that. Talks about the officers and the executive committee, who they are, who they should be, the duties of those people. That's the long one, that's not flipping more pages. Talks about expenditures and appropriations, so how does this chapter pay for things? How do we vote on and decide how money is spent? What does the power of the executive committee have, as opposed to needing to go to general membership and say, yeah, we want to spend $800 on a new projector, so you need to get approval from the membership to do that. So that's laid out in here. Talks about meetings as well, how many meetings need to take place in any given year. Talks about an annual meeting. Talks about dues and amendments. And that was kind of the point that Ed brought up. Technically speaking, this is similar to our national constitution. There's the Constitution, then there's the Bill of Rights. This is the Constitution, then there would be bylaws attached to this that would kind of help clarify. Right now, there are no bylaws. Everything, as far as we can tell, fits just within the Constitution. But there is a way in here that, in the future, the executive committee should so choose to change things or to add bylaws, they can absolutely do that. So the whole purpose is really just to kind of formalize things and make it more defined so that the chapter can operate and have less questions. Because there's been a lot of debate lately on who should be doing what, what's the role of the president, how long does the president serve, how long is a term. All that stuff is included in here. So I encourage you to be involved and take a look at it. I'm assuming then the paid members that get this, they're going to send comments. How are we going to compile it?
Well, I think what I will do, I will compose an email whereby I will solicit any comments on this. With other words, this has already gone around the bush quite a few times. We've debated this at length. Particularly within the community, there has been lengthy debate. You guys have been at this now for what, 6 months?
Yeah.
Something to that effect. And we finally got to see it as a board. We got to see it about a month ago. And we decided that we wanted to try to implement it, if possible, in this cycle so we can start at least working under the new Constitution next year. And why that is important to those of us who are actually involved in trying to make all this continue and go is that right now at this point in time, all the functions pretty well end up here. In other words, getting the people out, doing the program, getting everything organized. The last resort is the president, whereas under the Constitution that is not the case. There is more of a group and the work is divided. There's going to be a program chairman. There will be a certain amount of time that you can serve, at which point in time you're out and the next level of people will be in. At least that's the idea. Anybody who wants to volunteer, is my understanding, at least Ryan, that those people that do want to work on this can stay in this for quite a while. They can go through the various chairs. They can be past president and then come back in again in another function. With other words, it's not as if we're trying to get people out of here and you're out, you're done. No, we're trying to make it in such a way that it's a continuation of leadership. That's what we're trying to do with this. The Constitution from the Southwest chapter was basically, I was at the SFP convention when that was getting the honors, the fellowship, and these people were a brand new chapter. They were only about 3 years old. They had just done all of this. And he gave me a copy. He had it on his laptop. He gave me a copy on a thumb drive. I took it home and gave it to these guys. They compared that to what you guys struggled with back in the 70s. I believe, Doug, you were president for what, 7 years? Almost? 7 years. It's hard to believe I've been doing this for 3 years. So we'd like to put this together in a piece of paper, have the membership look at it, see what you guys think. I think you're going to like what you see. It's sort of being chewed over by quite a few people.
It's only a 5-page document, so
It's
I'm
not-
holding a lot here, but I have several copies. So.
And we can give you a couple, who's interested can get a couple of copies here tonight. We probably don't have enough for all 16 members, but, that are here tonight. But there are copies available, and we'll send it out for comment. If there is any comment, I'll bring it back to you. You're gonna take it back to your committee. If there's changes to be made, the committee will decide, and then hopefully we'll be able to vote on it on the next meeting, although we'll have to see how it works out. If there's a lot of comment on it, then that may not work. Is that okay?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to say thanks to Ryan for shepherding us through this process. He did a really great job in keeping us on task and setting up the meetings and keeping us going. So thanks a lot for doing that.
It's been a learning process.
Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting to see Phil here tonight, and I'm very pleased that he's here. Phil? Phil tells me that he's, in the absence of Scott, he's got a few comments on the Governor's Council, I believe. Do you want to come up and grab the non-working microphone?
You sound like a contractor. I didn't expect to see you on the site today.
Good to get Gatsby.
I'm the alternate to the Governor's Council on Fire, Prevention and Control. Scott's out of town right now. Some of the items that were discussed this morning, there was discussion of the proposed $1 million cut in the funding of the Department of Public Safety, Fire Marshal's Division. That information is conveyed by Tom Brace, Minnesota State Fire Chiefs Association. There are many departments that are at the state level that are getting cuts. And, this is one of them. They're going to legislatively try and go back and try and recoup some of these monies. But again, in another budget tightening item, they have I guess the legislature has the power to appropriate money. Now, even though they worked hard to get a dedicated fund for the State Fire Marshal's Division, all because you have a dedicated fund doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get all that money. It just all depends on the state's budget and what the current shortfall of the axe is swinging. Fire Marshal's Division, Department of Public Safety, is taking its usual hits. If anybody's interested in getting any tracking, there's a tracking list of fire-related legislative items. I've got a name and an email address of Sherry Munyon is the individual's name. Her number is 612-723-4245. I've also got her at smunyon@capitalaccess.us, so if anybody wants that information after the meeting, they can see me. But you can go right to that website, and anything that's fire-related that's going to be on the docket for the legislature, you're going to see it, and if you want input on it, there'll be contacts. There's also an initiative right now to license firefighters that's on the table. It seems to be part of this whole competency issue that I also serve on the Minnesota Fire Protection Advisory Council, and it's one of the issues that we've been addressing too, is a competency issue. So now there seems to be a big outcry from certain individuals as far as competency, licensing, certification. So they're thinking about, like I said, there was one initiative to start licensing firefighters. So again, check that website to see what information there is regarding those actions. Let me see. Oh, the other thing, Dan Bernardi was there. Now, Dan used to be at the State Fire Marshal's office. He no longer is there. He's in the private industry now. However, he's also, this year he will be assisting the governor's Fire Day at the Fair. This year will be the 10th annual Fire Day at the Fair. And it's very successful. The State Fair wants us to continue to sponsor and maintain this event. What's been happening over the last few years, they measure attendance at the State Fair as far as what's happening on what certain days, and I guess over the last 3 years, the first Friday of the fair, the Fire Day at the Fair, is the largest attended day of the fair. Last year they had over 127,000 people there, which broke a record for that Friday for the fair. So they're hoping to continue that. Right now, Regents Hospital is going to pursue with the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest fire service gathering in the world. So this year they're going to try and make it the largest fire service gathering in the world. They're also going to contact other fire departments and state fairs too to see where they stand on it. Maybe there'd be some type of friendly competition between the states on this. But Minnesota is going to pursue this, particularly Regents Hospital. At the end of next week, online information will be available for this event, and information and pictures of previous year's activities and archives are also going to be on it too. And there'll be a contact link for Dan Bernardi also. Again, you go to www.governorsfirepreventionday.com for additional information. But again, wait till about Thursday or Friday of next week, because that's when we'll have the website updated. We also had a little presentation regarding arson in Minnesota this year. It was a short presentation because of time constraints. But our speaker was Jerry Strike with Ramsey Fire Marshal, and Jerry put on a pretty good program. But some of the information gleaned from that was that in 2006, in the United States, there's more than $755 million worth of loss due directly to arson, and 345 arson-related deaths nationwide. And it's also still proven that over half those arson incidences are children fire setters, people aged 18 and younger. Although the state and many other communities have juvenile arson programs, it's still a growing problem. The biggest problem is that out of people who are charged with arson these days, only between 3 and 5% conviction rate on it. So that's why another reason is arson is a growing problem. And fires in the home, of course, fires in residences are the biggest cause of fire right now too. And kitchen fires are the biggest. So what's happening is that arsonists, if they're setting homes on fire due with the latest mortgage crisis, it's already happened more than once. There's been a deliberate kitchen fire set to basically cover up the tracks and to burn down the house and take care of the mortgage problem. So they see that until this mortgage crisis gets cleaned up a little bit, there's a possibility of more residential nursing cases coming up in the next year or so. And the Fire Protection Advisory Council did not meet this month. We're going to be meeting again next month. It's the second Thursday, which is April 10th, I believe, at 1 p.m. at the Oakdale Fire Station. And those meetings are open to the public. And like I said, two things about it that'll really get to you. If you ever see how laws are made and how sausage are made, you know, it's really kind of the same thing. So if you want to see some sausage made, come to one of our meetings.
Well, thank you very much. With the thought of talking about bylaws, I think what would be appropriate to welcome the past presidents here tonight. I see that there are quite a number of them here. Most of you probably don't realize or remember who they are. Would you please rise, starting with Ken? Which year were you president, Ken? Phil?
Yeah.
Ryan? Who else is here that I don't remember? That's 4 guys. Thank you very much. The other thing that I think is important for everybody to realize is that as a Minnesota chapter of the Society of Fire Protection Engineers, we have a rather diverse group of people. I'm looking at a group of insurance people over there, the fire marshal people over there, we have sprinkler contractors. There's a large variety, and what we're attempting to do with our programming is to bring people in that are of interest not only to sprinkler contractors but also to insurance people, to the fire marshal's office, to you had a meeting with the fire alarm people. We've got a couple of engineers here tonight. They seem to be the hardest group to drag in here, I must admit. But all in all, a very diverse group of people, and I'm very grateful that you're here tonight. And it's time to get started with the program. We're still early. Russ? Yep. I don't know how much of an introduction you need.
No, I don't
really know.
No, that's not worth it. Let's see, if you can just help me, I'll throw this in there. We're, can everybody hear me okay? All right, we're gonna, there's an 8-hour version of this, a 4-hour version, an hour-and-a-half version. We're gonna do the 13-and-a-half-minute version. Okay, no, we'll get through this, okay, but just go right to page 2 and start looking at the slides. As far as the first page of 3 slides, I'm gonna just give a little background. The only thing I want to point out about my background to help put in perspective my experience for this is 3 things, and most of us not even on there. One, I do sit on the Nfpa 25 committee. Okay, in fact, I was emailing committee members this morning because we've got a TIA that's probably going to come out on an issue. Number 2, our firm touches about 40,000 systems a year in every state in the union, so I wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and shake with the shakes, wondering what we're doing that could go wrong or is wrong or be wrong. Number 3, I'm a licensed fire protection contractor, or the RME, in 40 different states, including Minnesota, which all that means is I'm a good test taker. And somebody decided to have the experience, but taking tests is a big part of that. Except, I will admit that Hawaii took me 7 trips to pass. Why does everybody laugh? And I took it, it was a tough test. I kept missing it by 1 question. And I took it on every island. Each island is a county, you can take it. I took it on every island. Finally, they started complaining about these trips. And I passed it. I buckled down and I passed that test. But anyway, we're going to immediately jump into this standard. How many of you believe you have a really good understanding of Nfpa 25? Who wants to raise their hand and say that? How many of you think, well, I think I do, but when somebody asks a question like that, I'm not gonna raise my hand. I gotta tell you something, I think you will learn some things tonight, or if not, at least be reminded, okay, as we go through this. I also want to point out, before we jump into this, that the whole revision process, we're going to talk about the 2008 edition tonight, but some of the things that we're going to talk about here really apply since the first edition in 1992, because and that is the intent of the standard and what it's trying to accomplish. All right, but real quick, how many remember 13A? Okay, a lot of us in here, because I see a lot of gray hair. All right, remember 13A? What did the A mean? What did that designate? It was advisory or recommended. It was not a standard. We did not have a standard dealing with the maintenance of these water-based systems until 1992. The technical committee was appointed in 1990. The last edition of NFPA 13 was 1987. But here's the thing we want to talk about, okay, is why we have an NFPA 25, all right? This is the latest statistics that I've received. By the way, I instruct for the American Fire Sprinkler Association and for the Professional Development Series for NFPA. And so I got this from the latest NFPA statistics. This is what we're telling people that come to the NFPA Professional Development. Stats show us that 80% of our system failures can be attributed to a lack of maintenance. Okay? Not design issues, not criteria issues, but maintenance. Now here's the thing that, there's a nice picture of a typical lack of maintenance. But here's the staggering thing. 66%, or 2/3 of all water-based fire suppression systems that fail because of a shutdown. guys, if we could just get our valves looked at on a regular basis, we can eliminate 2/3 of all failures, not 2/3 of the 80%, 2/3 of all of our system failures. Now that's a real simple thing that we ought to be able to teach any owner, any maintenance person, anybody who actually has, eyesight to look at a valve. We just got to get it done. But think about, what easy, non-cost thing that we could do that would have an absolute terrific impact, an immediate impact on our system success rate. So, just keep that in mind. So, this is something that most people, including a lot of us sitting here, don't understand. The objective of Nfpa is to eliminate the failures that are caused by a lack of maintenance, period. Not design issues, not installation issues. And when you look through the standard, that becomes readily apparent. But it's hard for us to do. When I walked in this building tonight, when I walked in this room, I immediately looked up. My kids even look up now, because they've lived with me long enough. People, what are you looking at? Okay? But I'll look up and I see sprinklers. And what I immediately have a tendency to I start checking the spacing, I start checking the type of sprinkler, I look for obstructions, I look at all sorts of things. Nfpa 25 does not do that. Nfpa 25 does not check spacing, does not check the temperature reading, does not check the type of sprinkler. When we do that, we've exceeded the scope and the intent of Nfpa 25. But I can show you jurisdictions all around the country, contractors all around the country, insurance companies, inspectors that think it does. Or it should. Well, great, but there's reasons why it doesn't. So, as a result, Nfpa 25 is widely adopted throughout the country. Whether or not a jurisdiction has formally adopted 25 itself, any system that was installed under the 1994 edition of Nfpa 13 and subsequent editions are covered by Nfpa 25. Just look in the last chapter dealing with maintenance. All of those systems are required. It doesn't say should, it says shall be maintained in accordance with Nfpa 25. It's not widely enforced. Gosh, we still don't even, lots of states, lots of jurisdictions talk about they want an annual inspection done per Nfpa 25. There is no such thing as an Nfpa 25 annual inspection and test. I was just reading an article this afternoon in the library over at Mark's office, and I won't tell you where the library is, all right? But I was in the library reading the latest Sprinkler Quarterly from the National Fire Sprinkler Association. There was an article in there, and the writer's talking about that. We get, you hear us jump up and down. There is no annual inspection and test, guys. There are things that are done at certain frequencies. Some are daily, weekly, monthly, semi-monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, every 3 years, every 5 years, every 10 years, every 20 years, every 50 years, every 75 years, and every 5 years after that. Okay? But you will, now, what most of us think when we think in terms of an annual inspection, we think in terms of, well, all the things are required to be done annually and at lesser frequencies, right? So we think in terms of an annual, and contractors here will go out and do an annual, we'll go out, we'll inspect the sprinklers, right? That is an annual requirement. And we'll do, we'll test the water motor going if there is one. Well, that's a quarterly requirement. We'll test the flow switches or the pressure switches. Well, that's a semi-annual requirement. We'll look at the valves to see if they're open. That's a monthly requirement. Okay? The problem is, what about the 3-year stuff? Or the 5-year internal inspection of a check valve? It's never done. You know why? Because everybody's doing annuals. And there really is no such thing. And it becomes a real problem in states that have enacted an annual, by legislation, an annual inspection in accordance, and test in accordance with 25. Well, what does that include? Okay, so anyway, so it's widely misinterpreted by all of us. Okay, literally, by all of us. Now, one of the other things I do is that I serve as an expert witness, more than I would like to. But sometimes I just can't resist. I have 2 cases going right now, and no one here is a lawyer. Are there any lawyers here? What's that? No, I mean, you gotta understand that for those of you that are contractors, I'm just gonna say this because we have a whole seminar on this. If you're a contractor, be very, very careful about going outside the scope of NFPA 25. Because when you go outside the scope and you start looking at design issues, you just lost your protection of that standard. You can't now go and say, well, yeah, but we did this because it's in accordance with 25. We weren't checking that. Once you exceeded that, you wrote up deficiencies and told the owner he's got to do it, you just lost that. And we can go in a lot of detail about that, but we don't have time tonight, and we have a why not. I just want you to keep that in mind, okay? And there's a lot of information on that. So, all we're going to try to do here now in 12 and a half minutes is give you a greater appreciation of this standard, all right? So let's take a look real quick. I want to talk about the 2008 because I want to talk real quick. I'm going to go through some of the proposals that are rejected because it helps you understand the intent. Number 1, there was a proposal made to furnish copies to require copies, okay, and records of all inspections and tests performed to be given to the local fire department by the contractor, okay? Now, I sat around and I thought, okay, I know what we're trying to accomplish, but you know who stood up and objected right out of the gate to that? Who do you think raised the most active objection to that? Fire departments. Why? Well, here's the thing. How many of you, St. Paul's a good-sized city, right? Do you have the logistics to be able to monitor that and to be able to follow up on that? Because the concern from the fire service was there's going to be a report that comes in showing a deficiency that's not corrected that landed on my desk. 3 years later, there's going to be a fire, there's going to be loss of property or loss of life, or somebody's going to get hurt. And somebody's going to come back and say, gosh, you knew about that. This deficiency was reported to you 3 years ago, and you did nothing about it.
You picked the wrong city to pick at.
Well, what's that?
We required property owners to hire you guys to do those inspections and give us the reports, and we do follow up on all the deficiencies.
Well, and the point is, the point is 25 allows that. What they were saying is don't mandate that because most fire departments don't have logistically the ability to do that. Okay, to actually follow up and make sure it's happening. Because what were we trying to accomplish? Yeah, in lots of places we go in inspection after inspection and we write the same stuff up. The interesting thing is, though, that what are we looking for in those deficiencies? And this is where it gets complicated because you're going to see deficiencies that are outside the scope of 25. All the time. All the time. Okay? So, there was a proposal to have quarterly inspections of sprinklers. Now that went flying, down, except in one state. State of California has their own edition of NFPA 25 that was just adopted last January. It's called the California edition of NFPA 25, and they're requiring that. Okay? Annual inspection of sprinklers and other components located in concealed spaces. See, when I do an inspection, we'll see in Chapter 5, I don't have to look above the ceiling. When I walk in here, I never look above this drop ceiling. Do you realize that? Okay? I look at the sprinklers. I don't look at the pipe. I don't look at the hangers. I don't look at all of those things. Why? What?
More design issues.
Yeah, but couldn't have something happened up there?
The NFPA says you do your inspection from the floor. You walk through and do it from the floor.
But why? Why did the committee say, listen, just do it from the floor? Well, there's 2 things that we're trying to do. Okay? If we submit it, all right? The purpose, if we look at the purpose of standards, to be reasonable. If I have to look above the ceiling, all ceilings are in concealed spaces, what would happen to the cost of that inspection? It would skyrocket, okay? Because I can't just pop a ceiling tile and take a quick look if I'm going to do that. Number two is that, okay, statistically, the cost is not worth the benefit. It is pure and simple that statistically, the benefit from doing that is not worth the cost. Okay? It's practical. That's right. It's not to say that nothing could, but what that does do, those of you who do install systems new, those of you who inspect new systems, puts even greater responsibility to make sure when those systems originally go in that they're done correctly, because that piping technically under Nfpa 25 would never be looked at again until somebody actually changed the use of the building or room or the physical features or something like that that would trigger an evaluation. Keep that in. Let's see, backflush, the FDC every 5 years, that came from California, that was defeated. Provide list of all sprinklers in the spare head box. Nfpa 13 requires this. The committee felt that that could not be made retroactive. That would be too much of a hardship to make that retroactive. But be aware that the new 2007 does require that, and it's a good idea. All right? And then test components for compliance to original installation standard. That would be extremely difficult, and we'll help and we'll explain that. Some of the revisions, okay, real quick. Signs for all auxiliary systems, including dry, antifreeze, whatever. This is retroactive. Mark a note, this is retroactive for an owner. They have to put signs at the main system risers indicating the presence of any other auxiliary systems such as dry systems, antifreeze systems, whatever, being fed from that system, where they're located. And then in addition, at those, they have to have signs showing where low point drains are located and other things. This is for contractors' protection. This is risen right out of litigation, guys, okay? And this is retroactive. Why is it important for a contractor to know this? If you don't, check with your owner. If you're using the 2008, and even if you're not, still a good idea to point out that this is retroactive, and do you want me to do it? Well, you're going to just do it as part of your inspection? No. I'm going to have to charge for it because I'm going to have to really look in places where I normally would not look. Don't gloss over this. If you don't, get this either waived or have the owner do it, you're setting yourselves up for no protection when one of those dry system freezes up, okay? Because an auxiliary drain was not drained because you didn't know it was there, okay? So keep that in mind. Revised sprinkler obstruction inspection scope. If you look at the 2002 and previous editions, one of the things it said was unacceptable obstructions to spray pattern or sprinkler spray pattern shall be corrected. That's gone. The intent of the committee basically for obstructions was basically clearance below the sprinkler such as storage. It was totally impractical, folks, okay, to walk from the floor and make judgments on obstruction issues. I look at these sprinklers here now. These are spaced properly, okay? But if there was not a sprinkler, could I look from the floor here and determine if I was meeting the beam rule? Very difficult. And obstruction rules have changed over the years. When I first started designing, the old beam rule, throwing under a beam and being so far away from it, it allowed me to be a certain distance above the bottom, was the only obstruction rule we had. Now we have all kinds of obstruction rules. Well, if I got a bar joist, and I've got a standard sprinkler, I have to be 3 times the distance away from the size of the largest member. Oh, but if it's extended coverage, it's 4 times, well, let's see, that's a 3.5-inch bottom cord there, and that sprinkler definitely is at least 17.5 inches away from there. Right. And then you throw in ESFR and all the other issues, it's impractical to do. So obstructions become a design installation issue unless something was changed, okay, by the owner. Deleted low point drains are low points. If you look at, you say, drain the low points. Well, let me tell you what that meant. I've been in litigation, and how that would be used, okay, is the owner's insurance company would say, well, there was a sag in the line, okay, and there was water. Well, yeah, but there's no way to drain it. We just drain the drains. Yeah, but that's not what it said, and that's not the box that you checked. You checked that all low points were drained. Okay? And you'd be surprised at how often, okay, you get in front of people who don't understand, including judges, how often they would buy that argument. Okay? So we got that changed. There is a new dry system air test, okay, that we'll look at later. We have new component replacement action tables. We do have now a pass or investigate line for doing main drain tests. It says if my residual pressure is less than 10% in the previous test, that would trigger some sort of investigation, okay, on why there was that drop. And then all the sample inspection forms that used to be in the annex, the AFSA and Nfpa forms, are all gone. All the sample forms are gone, okay, out of there. There's the contents of the standard. Just want to point out in the 2008 edition, we added a chapter for water main systems. Okay, so keep that. The only reason I highlighted these others is that the chapter numbers just changed, okay? Want to look real quick at the scope. How many of you looked at the scope of the standard? Not very many. We just jumped right into the guts, okay? All right? In Nfpa 25, all standards, the scope is important. Nfpa 25, the scope is critical. Basically, if we look at 1.1, we'll find that it's minimum requirements. That's true of any Nfpa standard. It's always the minimum, all right? With water-based systems, it is now officially coordinated with Nfpa 72 as much as possible, okay? This is key, this language. It says specifically, okay, that systems that are not installed in accordance with generally accepted practices are outside the scope of this standard. Notice that it does not say installed with the code or in accordance with the standard. Nfpa 25 has to make the assumption, when I go and do an inspection, or when you do an inspection, that whatever is here, again, assuming that nothing's been done to the building and no change has occurred to the use of the area, that what is here, regardless of what it is, was inspected, accepted, and approved by all applicable authorities having jurisdiction. That is an assumption that the standard just has to make. Because if you were to walk into this building, okay, when was this system installed? And if we can figure that out, what standard was in effect or in use when this system was installed? And if we can even figure out that, what local variances were granted or local amendments might have been in place, et cetera, et cetera. And see the standard, again, because it's looking at maintenance and saying, hey, we're not saying, the standard's not saying that these sprinklers are spaced properly. But we're not trying to eliminate the failures that are caused by that. We're trying to eliminate the failures that are caused by the condition or neglect of the sprinklers that have been installed, okay? So, the key to that, and you can look in the handbook by David Hay, you can look at anything else, that really is not intended, with one or two minor exceptions, to reveal installation flaws or code compliance violations. And then last, it does not apply to 13B systems. Okay? Wow, we got fancy stuff here. And then this is the key. It's basically to ensure a reasonable degree of fire protection. Okay? Now, reasonable is one of those interpretive words. Reasonable to, you know, the building owner probably means, you know, free, okay? No deficiencies ever, all right, correct? Okay, reasonable to, the local fire department, but I mean, by darn, I don't want anything, okay, absolutely wrong with that system, I want it perfect. We know that somewhere it's got to be, in between. But that's, again, it goes back to what we're looking at. Chapter 2 talks about reference publications, we won't look at that. We want to talk real quick about definitions, all right? What does approved mean? What is the NFPA? This is an official NFPA definition that's the same in all NFPA standards. What does approved mean? What's the definition?
Acceptable to the AHJ.
Acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction. So who's the authority having jurisdiction, or what is an authority having jurisdiction? Is Marsh an authority having jurisdiction in some cases? Yes, okay. Or GRC, the authority having jurisdiction. Correct. You're representing insurance companies, right? Typically, okay. Are they an authority having jurisdiction? Certainly can be, okay. Is the St. Paul Fire Department or any other fire, are you an authority having jurisdiction? Yeah. What about the building owner? Are they an authority having jurisdiction? Yes. Okay. 3 different points of view. What's the mission of the fire department? What is the fire department doing as an authority having jurisdiction? And I'm not talking about protecting life and things. That's what is accomplished. But what are they actually doing? They're enforcing the law. It's an enforcement process. Okay? What about the insurance company? It's money. Period. I don't mean that in a cynical way. It is pure money. Risk. Okay? They could care less whether the sprinkler is building a sprinkler or not, as long as there's enough money to cover the risk. If they don't feel like the risk is unacceptable, they say, great, but I'm not going to expose my money to that building without a sprinkler system. But it has nothing to do with anything else other than risk, money. What about the building owner? What's the building owner concerned about? And you're all owners. How many of you own a home or live in an apartment? Okay, you're an HJ. What are you concerned about? Cost? Okay, yeah. You know what? It's easy for you to spend my money, Tom. Sure, okay. All right, what else? Aesthetics. And how it impacts my use of the property or operation. So we come in here, these sprinklers are centered in the ceiling tile. Did the fire department require that? No. Did the insurance company? Who required that? The architect representing the building owner building. And it's really important that they're center tile because everybody walks in and goes, wow, look at that. Those are really nice and symmetrical. We do. We march John Q. Public in here and go, what'd you think of the sprinkler system? And they go, what sprinkler? Okay, but anyway, it's important to somebody, right? What about the chrome recessed? Who specified that? Building owner. As a contractor, who's contractors? Who's the most important HJ to you? The owner, why?
Customer.
And they write a check. Okay. Now, some owners may say, I'm not writing a check until the fire department's happy or the insurance company's happy. Then I'll say, whoa, I gotta make everybody happy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And we forget that sometimes as contractors. Okay. We think as long as fire department's happy, why aren't you happy? So that's just one of those things. Listed, shall, I just want to tell you, what is shall? What's required, what's mandatory, what is should? Okay, so here's how real life works, guys. Owners, engineers, even contractors, if I didn't include something in my scope of work, okay, and I've got to pay for it myself, we want to take shalls and make them shoulds. Okay? Fire departments, fire inspectors, plan reviewers, it seems like they want to take shoulds and make them shall. Leave it alone. A shall's a shall, a should is a should. If you want to make a should a shall, then formally do that. okay? All right? And contractors, stop trying to take shalls and make them shoulds. You can't justify it. All right? All right, so we have enough stuff to argue over. There's enough words like moderate, reasonable, all of those. We don't need to argue about the street code. That's just my, is this being recorded? Holy crap. My name is Bob Caputo. All right. There's some other definitions that are really important. The only reason I want you to look at these definitions that they really help expose the standard. You look at the definition of inspection, and you don't have the standards, but you've got the reference there, and it hasn't changed from previous. And I haven't memorized, but I want to get the word exactly right for you, because here's what 25, this is NFPA 25's technical committee definition of inspection. Why is that important? Because it doesn't matter what you or I think the definition is. We only go to Merriam's 11th edition, Webster's Dictionary, when the word is not in here. By the way, that is true. Okay? If there's not a definition in here, we refer them, it is referred to the 11th edition of Merriam's Webster Dictionary. How did I know that? I found that out in a court of law. Anyway, all right, 3.3.18, definition of inspection. A visual examination of the system or portion thereof to verify that it appears to be in operating condition and is free of physical damage, period. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Does it say anything about that it is installed correctly?
No.
Is it designed? Is it spaced? And you won't find anything when we get in there. So, and then testing, there's definition, which basically says physical checks, which means I'm touching, maintenance, qualified. Qualified basically says, hey, anybody can do this stuff as long as they can show that they've got the knowledge and they have the experience. Now, some states, some jurisdictions say, that's a little too broad. So, for instance, in the state of Minnesota, if you're going to put your hands and do work on a system, you have to be licensed, right? Okay. But the intent here is that, do you have to be licensed? Does an owner have to be licensed to go out and do a monthly inspection on their, valves? Good heavens, no. And so that's why the definition is all-encompassing. It's up to the jurisdiction to refine that and narrow that down in a way that they would like to do that. Okay. So if you go to chapter 4 has general responsibilities, guys. There's only one word I want to say here. If we had a lot of time, we'd do more. It's the owner. The owner's responsibility. Now, the owner will delegate that to contractors. Okay? Those of you who are contractors, be careful. Don't take a work order that says, write up a work order that says, yeah, I'm going to do your annual inspection in accordance with NFPA 25, $250, period. You just opened yourself up a Pandora's box that you will not believe. Okay? You need to be very specific about what you are doing and what you are not doing, and you need to know the standard. Guys, the standard itself is only 41 pages. Half of those are in systems that most of us never touch. Bone water, water mist, all the other things. Half of what's left is pictures and stuff. Okay? You know what? Read it. And read it every month. Read it every week. Okay? You ought to know this thing if you're doing this work inside and out. And as much as I read it, the problem is that I lose bets all the time because I'm convinced that this says something or doesn't. And I'll be darned if somebody doesn't see something that I've read over 1,000,000 times. And just, I read it, but I didn't see it. Okay? So, but the owner, okay? But, so be careful what you take on from the owner, all right? This is new, and I want to point this out. Owners shall ensure that there are responsible occupants that know how to shut down the system. Okay? Why? Because most damage that occurs, now I want you to think about this, most damage in terms of claims and everything else, okay, are from water damage, not fire. And most of that damage is from accidental, unintended, holy crap, my forklift hit a sprinkler head, you know, and no one knows how to shut it down. I'm involved right now in a legal case, okay, where a sprinkler system froze and ruptured, and no one knew how to shut it down, including the fire department when they arrived. No one could figure out where the control valve, and this thing ran for over 90 minutes. When if it could have been shut down originally, it would have been maybe several thousand, maybe $10,000, $15,000 in loss. It turned into a $450,000 loss because no one knew how to, you know, where to find a valve and how to do it. So, record keeping has to be made available to the AHA upon request. That's why St. Paul can, right in accordance with Nfpa 25, say that you will give us all records of your inspections and tests as they are done. Original records are kept for the life of the building. And then subsequent records are kept for a period of 1 year after the next scheduled task, okay, whether it be inspection or test. So if I'm doing my 5-year internal inspection of a check valve, which we all do regularly, I keep it for 6 years. Okay. Let's see. Now, we're going to go real quick through just some of the basics in Chapter 5, because every chapter is geared like Chapter 5, okay? You'll see in every chapter, when you get into the chapter, you have it, they all have a summary table that basically gives all of the tasks, okay? Inspection, test, maintenance, the component or item, and the frequency, and then refers to you the written, you know, section that gives you the detail of that, all right? But let's look at some things that we'll see in here. Let's just look at inspections of sprinklers. How often is it done? How often do I look at these sprinklers? Anybody know? Annually. Once a year. That's what annual means. Okay. Once a year. Well, you know, I know North Dakota. Mark and I are good friends. We were good friends. All right. I do not look above ceilings or in, you know, concealed spaces. All right. And then this is what I'm looking for: painted, corroded or loaded, damaged, and that the sprinkler's in the proper orientation. Okay. I'm also checking to make sure glass bowls have liquid in them. Okay? And then let's just stop right there, okay? And that's basically it. What's important is what I'm not looking for. How many of you note in temperature ratings? Sprinkler's got the wrong temperature rating, it's right next to it. And contractors say, but gosh, if I know what's wrong, I know what's wrong. Great. Write it up. Just don't write it up under the scope of the inspection. What you want to say is that, hey, while I was there doing my inspection, I noticed that there may be a sprinkler. It appears that you might have a sprinkler that's the wrong temperature rating. Most important part of that is to say, but that does not mean that I intended, or that all other sprinklers located in the building are of the proper temperature, or that we're, you know, on and on. Okay, you got to be careful. Okay, how to do that. All right, but you see what's not there is critical. Okay, it also tells the owner that we're not inspecting for recalled sprinklers. What it says is, hey, if the owner has recalled sprinklers, you got to replace them. Now, the committee for 2 revision cycles now, there's been proposals to say that we need to look for recalled sprinklers. Okay, the committee has defeated that every time because it changes our scope. And the committee feels that there are other avenues of enforcement that are already in place for that. Okay? But if I have to start looking at a sprinkler to determine if it's recalled or not, what happened to my scope? All of a sudden now I'm not just looking at the condition of the sprinkler, I got to look at the type and if it's applied properly, which now takes away my protection from the overall scope. Okay? And then again, we changed obstructions to basically mean the clearance below the sink. So we look at pipe and fittings, guys, it's the same thing. I look at the floor annually, I don't look above the ceiling, and I'm looking for this, damage and leakage and corrosion. Up until 2008, in the 2002 edition, it also used the term misalignment. Holy smokes, do you know how that was applied? Oh, you know, the pitch on that dry system was wrong, and you said you drained the low point, and it's all stopped up and froze, and guess what? You're responsible. We don't check the pitch. It said misalignment. So we got it out of there. Okay? Because I defy anybody from the floor level to look at pipe and tell me if it's pitched properly in accordance with Nfpa 13 to drain the dry system. But that's how they were interpreting it, lawyers. That's how they were interpreting it. Okay, and using it.
So how do we, the AHJ, how do we capture the pipe pitch from?
You've got to do it when it's first installed.
If it's pitched wrong, then it wasn't first installed correctly, and we're stuck with it?
You're stuck, well, you're stuck, you're not stuck with it, but it's not going to be picked up in an Nfpa 25 inspection, because I can't do it from the floor. Right? Man, especially, I mean, and you see this all the time, where the roof pitch is different than the slope of the pipe. That really gets fun. Okay? All right? But, see, and again, and this is what I want to emphasize, guys. It's not that the committee or NFPA 25 saying that the pitch doesn't matter. They're having to limit, because I can't do that from the floor. And the minute you bring in a lift, okay, or whatever else, okay, because a lot of dry systems are above ceilings, but you now have taken the inspection scope, raised it tremendously, raised the cost, and all of that for what's considered to be, you know, the benefit not worth it. It should have been installed correctly to begin with. Now that means when it's installed, you know what, somebody may ought to be up there really checking that pitch. Okay, I can tell you this, 80% of the cases that I've been involved with over the last 10 years have all involved failures of dry systems. Not in a fire scenario, but in a maintenance, froze up, thawed, and, you know, and spit.
What happens in stick buildings that have dry systems up in the attic that have a tendency to settle over time when the building settles? 25 doesn't address that, unless that attic is a usable space. In the owner section of the sample inspection reports, there are no longer in the code. But it would say under the owner section that when was the last time that the dry system pipe was pitched? Is that gone now? Is that when was the last time it was pitched?
There was a question in the top portion that you were supposed to ask the owner, and one of the questions was, has the dry system been checked for pitch within the last 5 years or something like that? We always wrote no. The system was more than 5 years old.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why those plugs are gone.
So the samples are gone, so that's gone.
Yeah, those were just recommendations anyway, and the samples themselves didn't always follow the scope. Because I know the NFSA one talked about, or maybe it was AFSA, I don't remember which, asked about, are the temperature ratings correct? Where did that come from? Okay. And listen, it's not that it's a good idea to check that. It really is, and it'd be something that if I had a customer, I'd say, you know what, you got a dry system at that attic, you ought to have him go up and check it. But, it's not part of the scope.
It'd be like an addendum then to the inspection?
Pardon?
It'd be like an addendum to the inspection?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be very careful if I was doing that. I'd say, listen, I went up and checked the pitch, but I didn't check, other stuff.
Right, but I mean, even when you were making out the original contract, you could make out optional addendum.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Question on attics.
Yes.
If they are accessible, even though they're not being used, are you to go up there, is that considered it's above the ceiling, you don't go?
On an antifreeze?
No, on an attic.
In an attic, yes, that is correct. Okay? The intent is that even if it's accessible, I don't go up there. Okay? Now, if it's used for storage, if it's used for, purposes, then yes, it's now a used area. It's not considered an attic per se.
How do you know if the heads are aligned?
What's that?
How do you know if the heads are aligned? Going up there and checking. You hope they were there.
The assumption is that in an unused attic, that nothing has changed since it was originally installed.
You've never been around a low voltage contractor who comes in after our inspection.
Guys, we all understand, believe me, we all understand, but recognize that the committee had to draw the line somewhere. So what do you say? Well, we're only going to look above ceilings if what? You see, so they said, listen, you know what, you're not going up. The assumption is made that nothing changed from the day that building was originally inspected. Unless, some modification has taken place. And we get that hopefully from the owner. And they'll tell us that the first time until they realize they just opened up the can of worms and they never tell us that. Then the same thing on hangers and braces. From the floor, don't look above, and I'm looking for damaged or loose. So does that mean I check the spacing of hangers? Do I check whether or not the braces are at the right angles, or what you guys want to half size for up here, right? So but the issue is, I'm not looking at that. Okay, damaged or. And then there's other components. One thing I do want to point out here because of where we're at. 5.2.5 says that the owner is required to check the building to make sure that the areas that are supposed to be warm during the winter are kept warm and are warm. So that means vents are closed, all of those other things. This is something that I know contractor after contractor has been nailed with because they have not excluded that and not done that. So if you're not going to check that for the owner, okay, and you're doing an inspection in October, okay, you better exclude it. And that's one of those things that most of us didn't even know that was in there. Or, well, shoot, that's the owner. Not if you excluded it and you said, I'm doing an inspection and test based on Nfpa 25. And leave it at that, okay? Here's some sprinklers. There's a typical, is that a 25 issue? Yep, okay, all right. Here we've got a string that's got some loading on it. Temperature rating is not an issue. The fact that it's got some lift. Question comes up, how much loading is too much loading? The handbook basically recommends, and I agree with this, David Haig says in the handbook that, hey, if you can remove the loading, dust, lint, or whatever, either by blowing or sucking it up without touching or manipulating the sprinkler, that you would not have to replace it. If you have to scrub, scrape, whatever, the sprinkler must be replaced. And guys, the green sprinklers underneath the garage and canopy are corroded and by 25 are required to be replaced. And if you see those, okay, I would recommend the owner, the sprinklers you replace them with are corrosion-resistant sprinklers, okay? Painted. How much paint is too much? Okay, again, here's, if you have a question, you've got an owner that's saying, well, wait a second, they're just so springy. There's an easy way to answer that. Say, okay, we're going to pull out a couple sprinklers, we're going to send them to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer will do a plunge test. If the manufacturer will stand behind the sprinkler, then the paint's okay. If the manufacturer will not, and the warranty is voided, you got to replace them all. All right, and I can tell you manufacturers, okay, if those sprinklers have not been sample tested and there's any bit of spray on them, will not stand behind the warranty, period. So the way I tell my owners, any paint is too much. One real quick thing, when you're inspecting sprinklers, and you're going to walk by and you're going to go clean, 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 okay? And then you come next year, and whoever looks at it next year writes up that there's 400 painted sprinklers. You know why? Because they walked it from the other direction. Okay? Look, I'm sprinkler, okay? All right, okay? And hey, owners love that. When you keep coming back every year and finding more of the same stuff. Okay, but it happens. All right? Damage discussion, here's the question on discussion. See this ring here? That ring is part of the listed sprinkler assembly. If that ring's missing, that is a damaged sprinkler. If it's decorative, like the two-piece telescoping 401, that is not. That is purely cosmetic. Doesn't matter if there's a hole in the ceiling or not. That hole in the ceiling does nothing to the operation of that sprinkler. Okay? The heat goes across, not up. Okay, so, that's purely decorative. But when you have, sprinklers where the canopies, the rings, the covers are part of that listed assembly, that would be a damaged sprinkler. And then spacing, obstructions, guys, those are not part of that. We have testing. Testing of sprinklers, okay, have to do with the age. Gauges have to replace, they're tested every 5 years. Let's see, a couple things. Maintenance, replacement sprinklers must have the required characteristics for the application. Only new sprinklers shall be used. And let's see, fast response, standard response. Why does that matter? Because standard response sprinklers are tested at 50 years. Quick response or fast response at 20. We've got a whole bunch of fast response sprinklers out there.
Question,
One of the, yes.
how old can an unused sprinkler be?
As long as it's never been used or installed, there is no age limit. Now, there's a practical sense that tells us that, because that question comes up a lot. The sprinklers that are in the spare head box are intended to be used as replacement sprinklers. And those sprinklers could be 20 or 30 years old. Okay? But we can't use used sprinklers. Can't take sprinklers out of one building and carry them around and replace them in another. Okay? Good question.
That also applies to add and relocate some sprinklers too, if we remove a sprinkler head for the purpose of relocating it to another tile or whatever, for remodeling or whatever, technically, aren't you supposed to replace that sprinkler?
That question comes up a lot, and I see that interpreted both ways. I've had jurisdictions that say, listen, as long as you didn't put a wrench to it, you moved the drop and didn't actually take the sprinkler, no problem. But man, if you take that sprinkler out or physically take it out and actually reinstall the sprinkler in another RC or drop, can't do that. Okay? So that's kind of subject, I've seen it interpreted very narrowly and a little broader, okay, along that. Again, 25 just states only new sprinklers can be used. It doesn't really address.
Did you say that quick response sprinklers have to be replaced every 20 years?
Have to be sample tested or replaced. Now I'm going to go through that real quick, okay? Does everyone know what sample testing is? Okay? I remove 4 sprinklers or 1%, okay, whichever number is greater from my sample area. And then I submit those for testing. If one sprinkler fails, all sprinklers from the sample area have to be replaced. And they basically do a plunge test, guys. They do other things, but they basically check to see if the sprinkler will function, okay, within the parameters it was originally manufactured to. All right? Now, here's the thing. All sprinklers, at a minimum, regardless of type, all sprinklers have to be tested at 50 years, sample tested or replaced at 50 years. Okay? Then every 10 years thereafter, up until 75 years. Then they have to be sample tested or replaced at 75, and then every 5 years after that. Any sprinklers manufactured that you find before 1920 have to be replaced. Okay? Sprinklers, quick response or fast response sprinklers shall be sample tested or replaced at 20-year intervals. Okay? And then 10 years after that. We have all kinds of sprinklers fitting that. The first fast response sprinklers came out in the early 80s. Okay? Fast response sprinklers include residential sprinklers. Okay? Include ESFR sprinklers. Okay? All kinds of fast response sprinklers out there. This is the big one. Dry sprinklers shall be replaced or sample tested at 10 years. That was put in 2002, 10 years. You guys have dry sprinklers all over the place that are older than 10 years when you go out and look. If you're not doing it, you need to inform the older owner the fact that, hey, your building appears to be older than 10 years. You know, I would recommend that you sample, test, or replace your dry sprinkler. Sprinklers exposed to hazardous conditions, including outside weather, 5 years. Okay? Now, if they're corrosion protected and things, the standard tells us we can extend them. If the manufacturer has data on dry sprinklers that says this particular model will go longer than 10 years, you can go 20, you can do that. Okay? But that, you have to have that specific from the owner does from the manufacturer. That's the sample testing or replacement requirement. Okay? And let's see. We do have now tables in every chapter giving us instructions on what testing is required or acceptance is required for components that we change. Guys, all the remaining chapters are organized in a similar fashion. You have a summary sheet. You'll have a replacement action table. Some of the chapters will have a summary of corrective action. In chapter 6, say, valve leaking, it'll say close or repair. Okay? I mean, we have to get kind of simplistic at times, but it's there. All right? So keep that in mind. Anytime you do any system, you're going to have to look at 2 chapters at a minimum. If you're looking at sprinkler systems, you got to look at chapter 5 and chapter 13. All valves are located in chapter 13. Whether it's control valves, check valves, hose valves, all valves are found in chapter 13, backflow valves. Okay? Couple quick things. All valves shall be protected from damage. And guys, verify that you have adequate drainage before you open any valve. I always say, know where the water's going. Okay? As a company, we have bought new paint jobs on $100,000 Mercedes. We have been paid claims from a kid, 16-year-old kid, going through our water in the parking lot and seeing he could smoke the tire. It was an attractive nuisance. Okay? All right? Know where the water's going. I have flooded an old home improvement store called Home Base in Portland, Oregon, flooded them because I didn't know where the 2,250 gallons a minute out of our test header on a fire pump test was going on a retrofit. Yeah, that made my day too, okay? All right, so know that, all right? We talked about main drain. The point I did here is that 10% reduction. I want to just say one thing about main drains. Don't put a lot of faith in your main drain test, okay? Bill Shepard from General Motors, who sits on the committee, General Motors tested this, okay, because we used to require main drains quarterly. They went out on a loop around a large plant, closed virtually every valve feeding that loop to where they were just barely open, had no impact on the main drain test, registered no problem with the supply. Okay, because you got this big 10 or 12 inch loop with 8-inch feeds coming in, a 2-inch main drain, was getting plenty of flow and showed no residual pressure change, even though the valves were almost completely shut. Okay, so I want to just point that out. Control valves. Okay, 66% of our failures, guys, if we can just get this done. One thing that is retroactive, if I have a system that has more than one control valve controlling the water to that system, I have to have a sign on each one indicating the location and existence of the other valve. Where do we see this often? High-rises with interconnected systems between standpipes, where we shut a valve, we go pull ahead and go, oops. It's interconnected to the other standpipe. We now have, and that is, again, retroactive. Very few things are retroactive, but this is. And then inspect those valves, guys. And I have this in here. This is a 6-month-old backflow preventer. Okay, 6 months. backflow preventers have to be forward and backflow tested. What we're really concerned about is the forward flow test at system demand annually. Of course, since 1994, all of the new systems that we've installed have been required to be forward flow tested at system demand. Not the main drain, not the inspector's test, but through a test header or some other means of measuring flow. And when I mention that to contractors, including our own folks, they tell me I'm nuts. But it's in there, and you can go to the annex, and the annex tells you how to do it by maybe installing a test header or something. Obstruction investigations, I just want to point this out, okay, because obstructions are a big issue. And the one thing that we're seeing now, even more than Mick, good old zebra mussels. All over the country virtually. And they've been basically transported on boats, okay, from sports and recreation boaters from the Great Lakes to virtually every state in the United States. Okay. Impairments, I only mention this because, guys, impairments are a big issue. And impairment usually means what? A shut valve. If we can make sure that system's back in service when we leave, we eliminate 66% of our system failure. Okay, just real quick, bird's nest. Okay, that's in or out. Okay, stuff in our FDC, big issue. Control valves that are not supervised. All right, a hydrant that we can't use. That is part of 25. It has to be visible and accessible. Okay. Obstructed, loaded, whatever, that sprinkler's got a problem. And boy, that pipe has been well maintained. Okay? Partially shut control valve. Internal inspection of our check valves that's done religiously at 5-year intervals. Okay? Orientation of the sprinkler. Whoops. Orientation of the sprinkler. Well, I don't know if that's loaded or what. Okay, that's definitely loaded, okay? And you've all seen this one. All right? All of these pictures, there's even more come out of National Fire Academy, but they got some great pictures along these FDCs, okay? Again, there actually is an FDC out there somewhere. And guys, that's basically it. We could go on and on, okay? I appreciate it. I know it's late. If you have questions, I'm happy to be here. 3 things I want you to take away from this. It's important we understand the scope. Don't forget, the standard is intended to reveal and deal with maintenance issues, okay? That's the intent. Number 2, contractors, be very specific about what you are and are not doing. Don't get lazy here. It won't be an issue till it becomes an issue. Okay? But that's when, we wish that we had done it. Number 3, guys, educate those that aren't here. Learn the standard. Educate your competitors. Educate the AHJs that you work with on what this standard deals with. But anyway, I'll be around if you got specific questions. I'll try to answer them, and we'll let the rest of you get out of here. Thanks, Ed.
I would certainly say that you definitely have not disappointed me. I don't think you disappointed anybody else. It's always good to hear why things are done the way they are. And I think if there's anything that we ever remember is when somebody like Russ comes to us and says, well, this is why we did these things. I think that rather than reading the code book, this is probably the best way to get a good education. One thing I wanted to mention while you guys are all still and quiet before you leave, what we're going to do with the following years, we're going to send out membership invoices to those people that were members this year and the people that were members in previous years, so that we can get the membership issue out of the way before the beginning of the year. We don't have people saying, 4 meetings into it, well, it would be nice if I would have been a member, but it's a little late now. But we'd like to get that in a more organized fashion. We will get the PDF files out to you with the bylaws. Please look at it, those of you who are members. Any comments, we'd really like to hear about it soon so that we can still include it in next month's situation. And other than that, everyone who was here tonight, thank you very much for being here. And I'll notify you what's happening next month. And the rest, very much, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
So that adds these new options to our CO optical combination, we talked about that. And of course, combined with the photo are these for protection. So this is the four things I was talking about. Gas sensing, the constant gas sensing, this is the 75 parts per million over a certain period of time. And then you have the enhanced photo for fewer nuisance alarms. Then you have the enhanced photo for accelerated detection of alarm. So one's making it more sensitive, the other one is pushing the sensitivity out. It doesn't see the CO. And that's the way it looks. The elements can be changed without changing the base. And that's it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Marty. Any questions for Marty?
Yes.
Will that CO detector, it does come in a sounder base too?
Yes.
That's pretty
Yes.
simple.
Actually, the footprint is the same. In other words, it won't fit in a smaller base that we have, but it won't fit in this size base. And you see this has a sounder.
Yeah, I see it.
So this is good for warm rooms or whatever.
And Adrian and Marty both, are your presentations available as a PowerPoint that we could download or make available or
Yes.
print out or?
Yes. You want to take it now, I can give it to you. I have one on stick.
Super. And Adrian, I think you also made the same. Great. Okay, we'll try to link that on the website too, as we get those set up. And that's it for our meeting this evening, gentlemen. Thank you for all attending and do it again next month. Thank you.
Residential fire sprinklers in every home. In all new construction. If we can't stop stupid, we gotta have something in there